Okay, for the second part of this parabola video, we are going to look at problems that deal with that formula I gave you at the end of the first video. And so the first question is for you to write an equation of a parabola with a vertex at the origin and a focus at 0, -5. And so remember that the origin is 0, 0. So the first thing that I do is I kind of sketch to myself what is going on. Well, we have vertex at the origin, so right here, and the focus is at 0, -5, so that would be down on the y-axis a little bit. That tells me that the parabola is going to open downwards, and I can figure out that that distance between the two, c, is 5. So even though it went down, we're just worrying about the distance, which means it's a positive distance. We don't worry about the negative part of it. The negative comes in the fact that it opens down. Then I go to the formula, the absolute value of A equals 1 over 4C that I gave you before. And I am trying to find that A. So the absolute value of A would be 1 over 4 times 5, since we know our C is 5. And so that means I get 1 over 20 as my A. Now, then you decide, should it be positive or should it be negative? That's why there's an absolute value on the A. Since it faces down, you know that it is a negative parabola. So your A, in this case, is -120. And you can then make your equation. It's a y equals x squared graph because it's facing down. So it's -1 over 20 x squared. And that's all there is to that one. Okay, for our third example, we're going to do another one of these, but we're going to have a vertex at 0, 0. Again, that's just the origin, another way of saying that. And a focus at -3, 0. So I begin by figuring out which way it's facing, because that's going to help me in the end. Since our vertex is at 0, 0, yet again, we're right here. And then if my focus is at -3, 0, that would be back here. And so that would be my focus. And that tells me that my parabola has to face to the left. Another thing while I'm right here, I figure out is C. That distance between the focus and the origin is, in this case, 3. So C is 3 for this one. And then I go back to that absolute value of A equals 1 over 4C. But in this case, I know that C is 3. So the absolute value of A equals 1 over 12. And now I want to think about making my equation. Well, as I mentioned, parabolas that face to the left are x equals y squareds, and they end up negative. So that tells me that A is actually -1/12. And my equation, is not y. It is x equals the -1/12. y squared. Okay, for our fourth example, we're going to kind of work backwards from what we just did a minute ago. We are now going to identify the focus and the directrix given the equation. So again, I'm going to start with that absolute value of A equals 1 over 4C formula. And our A in this case is this -1/16. So the absolute value of -1/16 equals 1 over 4C. Well, absolute value turns things positive, so we have 1/16 equals 1 over 4C. And you can either just equate the bottoms or realize it's cross multiplying, and the 16 would equal the 4C. And if you divide by 4, your C ends up to be 4. Now, this equation also tells us about how this is facing. And so it's a y equals -x squared graph, so it's going to face down. And so if I draw a parabola facing down, if the C is 3, remember that's the distance to the focus and to the directrix. And so to the focus, if I go 4 down, my focus is at 0, -4. The directrix would be the line up here, and it would be a distance of 4 again from that vertex. And so that line would be y equals positive 4. So your directrix is y equals 4, and your focus is the point 0, negative 4. And those are the two answers that they're looking for. Okay, now for another example of this, we want to identify the focus and the directrix of y equals 1/12 x squared. So I'm going to start out by figuring out what my c is. So the absolute value of a, so the absolute value of 1/12 equals 1 over 4c. And again, absolute value turns things positive. This is already positive. So I have 1/12 equals 1 over 4c. You can cross multiply, or you can just realize that the 12 has to equal the 4c. And then you divide and you get c is 3. So then you think about, okay, which way is this thing facing? And since it's y equals x squared and it's positive, that's a parabola that should face up. Then you use the c to calculate. Well, the focus should be up here now. And so if you go 3 up from 0, 0, you're at 0, 3. So your focus is at 0, 3. And then our directrix should be back here, a distance of 3 away from the vertex. So that would be the line y equals negative 3. So this is our focus, this is our directrix. Okay, for our last example, we're going to identify the vertex, the focus, and the directrix of this parabola. And it is not in a form that is pleasing to look at. We've got to work on it so that we can figure some things out. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this with my y's together and leave some space to complete the square. I'm going to subtract or add the x part and the number to the other side. So I'm going to, this negative 4x, I'm going to add it to the other side and get 4x. And this positive 16, I'm going to subtract. And so I'm going to be completing the square with the y, because the y is what had the square in this situation. So if you remember to complete the square, you look at the number in front of y, you take half of it and square it. So half of 4 is 2, 2 squared is 4. I'm going to add that to both sides. Then this is going to factor every time to the same two parentheses. Y minus whatever half of that number is, so in this case 2 squared. Over here, I can combine the negative 16 and the 4 and get negative 12. And here's where it gets a little weird. Because you know the y is squared, you want to solve for x. So we're going to add 12, get it back over on the side with the y's. And then we're going to get the x by itself. So you want to get the variable by itself that is not squared in the problem. So divide by 4, divide by 4, divide by 4. This first one I'm going to write as 1/4 y minus 2 squared. 12 over 4 is of course 3. And then here they should cancel and give you x. When you're in this form, you can figure out that the a is that 1/4. It is the number in front. And if you put that in the formula, you can see that c has to be 1, because if a is 1 over 4c, and this is 1/4, the c has to be 1. Okay, the vertex you figure out almost the same way that you've always figured out, except for the fact that these are y's. And so when it's inside parentheses, it does the opposite of what you think. Okay, I was interrupted, so let me come back to finding the vertex. When it's inside parentheses, it does the opposite of what you think, and since the y is inside the parentheses, this 2 is telling us that we are going to go up. On the outside of parentheses, it does exactly what you think, and since we already know which way the y is going, this is affecting the x. So this means that we are going right 3, this means that we are going up 2. So our vertex is at 3, 2. from there, I kind of draw the picture to get that focus and directrix, kind of like I was doing in the last problem. So if I sketch this out and I go to 3, 2, and I think about my c being 1 and the fact that this is an x equals y squared and it's a positive 1/4, I know this has to face right because x equals y squared positive is going to face right. Since my c is 1, my focus is going to be 1 unit to the right of the vertex, which would be at 4, 2. So my focus will be at 4, 2 because it's 1 unit to the right of the vertex. The directrix would be 1 unit back, and it would be a vertical line this time. And so 1 unit back from our vertex would be at 2, x equals 2, as my vertical line. So directrix at x equals 2. And again, this is a little challenging, but if you'll learn which way the parabola focuses and draw the picture, you should be able to count and figure out where your focus and directrix will be. This is the end of the notes, and you can come see me for your worksheet.